The first thing you notice about the Vigneto Club after midnight isn't the sound, but the silence underneath it. The thrum of the bass was a given, a physical presence in the air that vibrated through the soles of your shoes. The laughter, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of 100 conversations. That was the surface. But beneath it, in the spaces between the notes, was a watchful, calculating quiet. It was the silence of money, of power, of secrets exchanged without a single word being spoken. I moved through it all like a ghost in a uniform. Stiff white shirt, black vest, a bow tie that felt more like a noose after 8 hours. My name is Alara, and for the last 3 years, this velvet-draped cage has been my life. I poured 12-year-old scotch for men who called each other sir, while their eyes promised violence. I served champagne to women whose smiles were as sharp and cold as the diamonds at their throats. I was invisible, and that was the only thing that kept me safe. Tonight, the silence felt different, heavier. It started the moment he walked in. They didn't have to clear a path. The crowd parted, a human sea yielding to a shark. Lorenzo the Wolf Volkov. I didn't need the hushed whispers to know who he was. Everyone in the city knew. His reputation was a long, dark shadow, and tonight it had fallen across my bar. He was taller than I expected, built with the solid, immovable grace of a cliff face. Dark hair, silvered at the temples. A suit that probably cost more than my entire college education. Tailored to perfection. But it was his eyes that arrested me. A chilling, pale gray, like a winter sky moments before a storm. They scanned the room, not with interest but with ownership, and for a terrifying second they landed on me. I dropped my gaze, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I focused on polishing an already spotless glass, the routine motion a desperate anchor. Don't look up. Don't attract attention. Be the ghost. His entourage settled into the reserved booth in the corner, a nest of black suits and watchful eyes. But he didn't sit. He detached himself and walked toward the bar. My bar. Each footstep on the polished marble floor was a nail in my coffin. The space around me emptied as other patrons subtly found reasons to be elsewhere. I was ground zero. Vodka, he said, his voice a low rumble that bypassed my ears and vibrated straight into my bones. It was accentless, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. Crystal Head if you have it. Neat. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. I turned, my movements clumsy, and reached for the iconic skull-shaped bottle. My hands, usually so steady, trembled. I could feel his gaze on my back, a physical weight. As I poured the crystalline liquid into a heavy crystal tumbler, a man slid onto the stool next to Volkov. He was younger, with a slick, nervous energy. Marco is a junior manager. I'd never liked him. His smile never reached his eyes. Lorenzo, a pleasure as always, Marco said, his voice too loud. Let me get that for you. Before I could react, Marco reached over the bar, took the glass I had just poured, and set it in front of Volkov. Then, with a flourish that made my blood run cold, he produced a small, unlabeled bottle from his pocket. A gift, Marco said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper I was clearly meant to overhear. From the new shipment. The purest you'll ever taste. A special blend, just for you. He unscrewed the cap and tipped a single, clear drop into the vodka. It vanished without a trace. My breath hitched. Every instinct I possessed, every lesson learned from a childhood I'd spent a decade running from, screamed in unison. This was wrong. This was a hit. Marco's posture was too eager, his eyes too bright with a strange, feverish anticipation. The way he'd intercepted the drink, the secretive bottle, it was a script from a nightmare I knew all too well. Volkov stared at the glass, his expression unreadable. He reached for it. Time didn't slow down. It shattered. My father's face flashed in my mind, his voice a desperate echo from the past. Don't ever get involved, Alara. You see something, you look the other way. You survive. But looking the other way was how we ended up at his funeral. My hands were moving before my mind could catch up. On a pristine cocktail napkin, I scrawled 5 words with a shaking hand. The pen felt like a weapon. I slid the napkin across the polished wood of the bar. It came to a stop right beside his untouched glass. Don't drink it, smile and leave now. I didn't look at him. I just turned and busied myself with the sink, pretending to wash a glass. My entire body braced for the explosion. The silence behind me stretched, taut and deadly. I could feel his gaze shift from the napkin to me. I heard the soft rustle of paper as he picked it up. A second passed, then another. The bass from the club pounded in my temples. Had he read it? Would he listen? Suddenly a hand shot out, not to take the glass or to throw it away. His fingers, strong and impossibly warm, wrapped around my wrist, pinning it to the bar. The grip wasn't brutal, but it was absolute, unbreakable. I gasped, my head snapping up to meet his winter gray eyes. There was no anger there, no surprise, just a deep, unnerving intensity, as if he were seeing me for the first time, and he was memorizing every single detail. He leaned in close, his voice a whisper meant only for me, the scent of cedar and cold night air washing over me. "Why?" he murmured, his thumb pressing against the frantic pulse in my wrist. "Would I do that, little ghost?" He hadn't drunk the vodka. He hadn't left. He had grabbed me instead, and in that moment, I knew with terrifying certainty that my life of invisibility was over. The world narrowed to the points of contact. The cold, hard bar under my forearm, the searing heat of his grip on my wrist, and the terrifying intensity of his gaze. My heart wasn't just pounding. It felt like it was trying to shred its way out of my chest. Every survival instinct screamed at me to pull away, to run, to scream for help that would never come for someone like me. But I was frozen, trapped in the gravity of his presence. I don't know what you mean," I stammered, the lie flimsy and transparent. I tried to tug my wrist back, but his hold tightened infinitesimally, a silent, effortless reminder of his control. It wasn't painful, not yet, but it was a promise of how easily it could be. "The note," he stated, his voice still low, a private rumble in the cavernous noise of the club. His eyes flicked down to my trapped hand, then back to my face. "Explain." He hadn't acknowledged Marco. He hadn't looked at the poisoned glass. His entire focus was on me, and it was more terrifying than any overt threat. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Marco's smug smile falter, confusion, and then a flicker of panic replacing it. "Lorenzo? Is there a problem with the gift?" Volkov didn't even glance his way. "Leave us," he said, the words dropping like stones. Marco opened his mouth to protest, but one of the men from the booth, a mountain with a scar bisecting his eyebrow, took a single step forward. Marco paled, nodded jerkily, and slithered off the stool, disappearing into the crowd without a backward glance. We were alone again, an island of terrifying quiet in the sea of music and laughter. "You have 5 seconds," Volkov said, his thumb stroking once, slowly, over my pounding pulse point. The gesture was intimate, possessive, and utterly chilling. "Who are you?" "Alara," I whispered. "I just work here." "That is not who you are. That is where you are." He leaned closer, his voice dropping even further. "You saw something. You acted. People who just work here do not do that. They look away. So I will ask again, who are you and what did you see?" The truth was a dangerous currency, but a lie now would be a death sentence. I could see that in his eyes. He was a man who dealt in absolutes. "The bottle," I breathed out, my voice trembling. "It wasn't right. He was too eager. He intercepted the drink you ordered to give you that one. It's a classic play." One of his eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. "A classic play," he repeated as if tasting the words. "You seem familiar with the genre." He finally released my wrist. The skin tingled, already feeling the ghost of his grasp. I instinctively cradled it with my other hand, my fingers brushing over the warmth he'd left behind. He didn't move away. He watched me, a predator assessing strange new prey. "We need to leave," I said, finding a sliver of courage. If he realizes it didn't work, he will panic. Panic makes people stupid. Stupid people are easy to find. His logic was cold, brutal, and utterly confident. He picked up the napkin I'd written on, folded it neatly with one hand, and tucked it into his inner suit pocket. The gesture felt strangely final, like a contract being sealed. "You're coming with me." It wasn't a question. It was a decree. "I can't. My shift isn't over. I have—" "Your shift," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument, "is over. Permanently. You do not work here anymore." He stood, a tower of imposing darkness. "Get your things. Now. The finality in his voice brooked no argument. My mind raced. My bag was in the staff locker room. My phone, my keys, and my pathetic life were in that bag. To get it, I'd have to walk away from him, to have a moment alone. Was this a test? Would I run? I looked at his eyes and knew with a sinking certainty that running would be the last mistake I ever made. He would find me, and he would not be gentle a second time. Numbly, I nodded. I turned and walked toward the staff door on unsteady legs, feeling his gaze burning into my back with every step. The locker room was a stark contrast to the club's opulence. Fluorescent lights, chipped linoleum, the smell of stale perfume and bleach. My hands shook so badly I could barely work the combination lock. Sophia, another bartender, was changing out of her heels. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." A hysterical laugh bubbled in my throat. I felt like I'd become one. "I'm fine, just not feeling well. I'm leaving." I shoved my apron into the locker, grabbed my worn leather bag and slung it over my shoulder. It held everything I owned that mattered, just like always. Some things never changed. "Whoa, wait, what did Volkov want?" Everyone's talking. "He grabbed you." Her eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. "It was nothing. A misunderstanding," I lied, my voice hollow. "I have to go." I pushed through the door back into the hallway, half expecting him to be gone, for this to have been some cruel, surreal joke. But he was there, waiting, flanked by two of his men. The one with the scar, and a younger, leaner man with cold, empty eyes. They looked at me not as a person, but as a package. An asset, or a problem. "This way," Volkov said, gesturing toward a service exit I'd only ever used to take out the trash. The cold night air hit me like a physical blow as the door swung open onto a dimly lit alley. It smelled of damp concrete and rotting garbage. Parked right there, its engine a low purr, was a black Rolls-Royce Cullinan. The back door swung open automatically. "Get in," he said. There was no choice. It was the alley or the car, the unknown or the man who held my fate in his hands. I took a breath, the last free breath I feared I would ever take, and climbed into the opulent, leather-scented darkness. He slid in beside me, his large frame taking up an immense amount of space. The two other men got in the front. The doors closed with a soft, definitive thud, locking me in. The car pulled away from the curb in unnerving silence. I stared out the tinted window, watching my old life. The club, the lights, the ordinary danger I understood, disappear into the night. I was in a cage rolling on wheels. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, my voice small in the vast quiet. "Somewhere secure," he replied, not looking at me. He was looking at his phone, typing a quick message. "Where can we talk?" "I told you what I saw." "That's all I know." "No," he said, finally turning his head to look at me. The passing streetlights cast fleeting shadows across his sharp features. "That is the beginning of what you know. You recognized a classic play. You risked your neck for a stranger. That is a story I very much want to hear." He leaned back, the leather creaking softly. "So, Elara, start from the beginning. Not tonight's beginning. The real one. The beginning." The words hung in the perfumed air of the car, a key poised before a lock I had sealed shut years ago. Where was the beginning? Was it the first time I heard a gunshot and didn't flinch? The first time I packed a bag in the middle of the night? The day they lowered my father into the ground, his principles etched on his cold face, a warning I had tried so hard to heed. I couldn't tell him that. The truth was a landmine, and every step could trigger an explosion. "There is no story," I said, turning to look out the window at the blur of sleeping city streets. "I'm a bartender. I watch people. It's my job to know when someone is lying, when they're nervous, when they're about to do something stupid. Your friend Marco was all three." I could feel his gaze on my profile, dissecting me. "He is not my friend," a simple, chilling correction. "And you are not just a bartender. You have the eyes of someone who has seen the wolf before, and knows better than to look away." The metaphor, coming from a man called the Wolf, sent a fresh shiver down my spine. He was too perceptive. I had to give him something. A piece of the truth that was sharp enough to be believable but small enough not to gut me. I kept my eyes on the passing city. My father was an import-export. He had business partners. I grew up around men who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. I learned to read the tells, the too-firm handshake that's meant to intimidate, the joke that isn't a joke, the way someone offers a drink they didn't order themselves. I chanced to glance at him. His expression was unreadable, but he was listening. Truly listening. Marco's hands were shaking. His pupils were dilated. He was performing, but badly. The special bottle from his pocket was a prop. It was a performance I'd seen before. I left it there, letting him draw his own conclusions. Let him think my father was a low-level crook, a two-bit hustler. It was safer than the truth. Your father, Volkov repeated, his voice thoughtful. Where is he now? He's dead. The words were flat, final. His business partners saw to that. This at least was not a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. A moment of silence passed, filled only by the whisper of the tires on asphalt. Then you understand the nature of the world, he said. And it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a grim welcome. It is not a kind place. Loyalty is a currency, and betrayal is the tax on power. He fell silent again, and I dared to hope the interrogation was over. The car had left the bright lights of downtown and was navigating a neighborhood of towering, silent condominiums overlooking the lake. We pulled into a private underground garage, the gate sliding shut behind us with a sound of finality. The garage was pristine, lit by cold fluorescent lights, and housed a small collection of vehicles that were each worth a fortune. This wasn't a home. It was a secure location, a bunker disguised as luxury. The scarred man, who Volkov called Kyle, got out first, scanning the area before opening our door. The younger one, Alexei, stayed close, his hand resting near his waist where I was sure a weapon was concealed. We entered a private elevator that required a keycard and a biometric scan. It ascended smoothly to the penthouse. When the doors opened, my breath caught. The entire far wall was floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the city skyline and the dark, endless expanse of the lake. The interior was all cool minimalism. Polished concrete floors, low-slung leather furniture, stark white walls adorned with a few pieces of brutalist art. It was powerful, masculine, and utterly soulless. It fit him perfectly. You will stay here tonight, Volkov said, shrugging off his suit jacket and draping it over the back of a chair. He moved to a bar cart, far more elegant than the one I worked, and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass. He didn't offer me one. Kale will remain outside the door. Do not attempt to leave. The command was absolute. He was treating me like a prisoner, but one he'd housed in a 5-star cell. You can't keep me here, I said, a spark of defiance igniting despite my fear. He took a slow sip of his drink, his gray eyes pinning me over the rim of the glass. I can, and I am. You interfered in a matter you do not understand. That act made you a part of it. Until I know who Marco was working for and what they intended, you are a material witness. And a potential target. A target? The word was a cold stone in my stomach. They saw you. They saw you speak to me. They saw me take you. If they are competent, they will already know your name. Your address. He let that hang in the air. A sentence of its own. My apartment. My small, shabby, but mine apartment with its flimsy lock and friendly, oblivious neighbors. It was no longer safe. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. I was untethered. Jobless, homeless, and trapped in the penthouse of a crime lord. This is insane, I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself. I was just trying to do the right thing. The right thing, he repeated, a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his eyes. A dangerous habit. He finished his drink and set the glass down with a soft click. There is a guest room down the hall to the right. It has everything you need. We will continue this in the morning. He turned and walked away, disappearing into a main suite without another word, leaving me standing alone in the vast, silent, beautiful room. I was adrift. I found the guest room. It was like a hotel suite. King-sized bed, ensuite bathroom with marble tiles, a walk-in closet empty except for a plush robe. It was impersonal and perfect. I sat on the edge of the bed, my bag still slung over my shoulder. I felt dirty, out of place. I pulled out my phone. No service, of course. He'd thought of everything. I was completely cut off. I thought of my friend Chloe. We were supposed to have brunch tomorrow. She'd text, she'd call, she'd worry when I didn't show up. What would I tell her? That a handsome Mafia kingpin had kidnapped me? It sounded like the plot of a bad movie. But the fear was real. The memory of Marco's panicked eyes was real. The phantom grip of Volkov's hand on my wrist was real. I was trapped in a gilded cage, and the wolf was right outside the door. I didn't sleep. I lay in the absurdly comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the building. Every creak, every hum of the central air was a potential threat. My mind raced, cycling through escape plans and discarding them just as quickly. Where would I go? What money did I have? I had a few $100s in cash, maxed out credit cards, and a perpetually anemic bank account. I was, for all intents and purposes, already his. The sun was beginning to tinge the sky with a pale, sickly light when I heard a soft knock on my door. I jolted upright, my heart in my throat. Yes? The door opened, and Kyle stood there, his massive frame filling the doorway. He held a stack of folded clothing. "Boss thought you might want a change of clothes," he said, his voice a low gravel. He placed them on a chair just inside the door. "Breakfast is in 30 minutes. He left, closing the door behind him. I stared at the clothes. A simple pair of dark jeans, a soft cashmere sweater, and undergarments, all in my size. The intimacy of it, the unnerving efficiency, made my skin crawl. He hadn't just guessed. He'd had someone find out. When I emerged, showered, and dressed in the clothes that felt like a uniform I hadn't chosen, I found Volkov at a dining table, reading a tablet. He looked up as I entered. In the morning light, he looked different. Still dangerous, still imposing, but more real. The sharp lines of his face were softened slightly, the silver at his temples more pronounced. He was dressed casually in dark trousers and a black sweater, and it made him seem no less powerful, only more approachable, which was somehow more dangerous. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. A spread of food was on the table, pastries, fruit, and a carafe of coffee. My stomach churned. I sat, pouring a cup of coffee just for something to do with my hands. "We have located Marco," he said without preamble. I froze, the carafe hovering over my cup. And he was found in his apartment. An apparent suicide. The words were ice water in my veins. I set the carafe down, my hand shaking. "Suicide. That is what the evidence suggests," Volkov said, his tone neutral. "But you don't believe it. I do not deal in beliefs. I deal in facts. The fact is, the man who tried to poison me is dead before he could be questioned. That is not a coincidence. It is a cleanup." He took a sip of his coffee. "It means whoever he was working for is thorough. And they are still out there." He looked at me, his gaze direct. "Which means you are still in danger, and your value to me has increased." My value? The words felt like ash in my mouth. I was no longer a person. I was an asset, a piece on a chessboard I couldn't see. "How?" "You are the only living person who was there," he stated, his logic as cold and clean as a surgeon's scalpel. "You saw Marco's behavior. You might have noticed something else, a detail you've forgotten, a name spoken, a text message you saw him send, a person he looked at before he approached me. Memory is a curious thing. Under the right pressure, it can yield unexpected results." I pushed the plate of food away, my appetite gone. "So I'm your consultant now?" "You are my guest," he corrected, though the word was a lie and we both knew it. "A guest with a unique perspective. And until the threat is identified and neutralized, your safety is my priority. My safety or your access to my memory." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. They are for the moment the same thing. The rest of the breakfast passed in a tense silence. He returned to his tablet, scrolling through financial news and emails with a focused intensity that was intimidating. I picked at a piece of fruit, my mind racing. Marco was dead. Murdered. The reality of it was a cold stone in my gut. This wasn't a game. The people we were dealing with didn't just fire employees. They erased them, and I was a loose thread they would happily snip. After breakfast, he stood. "I have business to attend to. Kale will remain. Do not attempt to contact anyone. The phone lines are monitored, and the perimeter is secure." He paused at the door, looking back at me. "The library is through that door. You might find it diverting." And then he was gone. The elevator door swallowing him whole, leaving me alone with the silent, watchful Kale. Diverting. The word was a taunt. I was a prisoner with a view. For a long time, I just stood at the window, watching the city come to life below. People were going to work, getting coffee, living their everyday lives, oblivious. I felt a pang of such profound longing it was a physical ache. I would have given anything for my cramped apartment, my noisy neighbors, the soul-deep exhaustion of a double shift. The mundane had never seemed so beautiful. Eventually, restlessness drove me to explore. The penthouse was vast. Beyond the main living area was a state-of-the-art kitchen that looked never used, a formal dining room that could seat 20, and finally, the library. I pushed the heavy wooden door open and stepped inside. It was breathtaking, 2 stories high, with a wrought iron spiral staircase leading to a mezzanine level. The walls were lined with books, real books, whose leather spines were worn and smelled of old paper and wisdom. It was the first thing in the entire place that felt warm, that felt lived in. My fingers trailed along the spines as I walked. History, philosophy, volumes of poetry in multiple languages. This wasn't a decorator's collection. This was a reader's library. It was a contradiction that unsettled me. The man who could order a death with a single word also read Rilke. I climbed the spiral staircase, the metal incredible under my bare feet. The upper level had a comfortable armchair and a small desk. And on that desk, sitting alone as if waiting for me, was a book, a collection of Italian sonnets. It was old, the pages foxed with age. Something made me pick it up. It fell open to a specific page, the spine cracked from repeated use. One poem was circled in faint, elegant pencil. My love is like a fever, longing still. I snapped the book shut, my heart doing a strange, uncomfortable flip. This was a vulnerability, a crack in his armor. And I had no idea what to do with it. I felt like I'd stumbled upon a secret I wasn't meant to see. The day dragged on. I tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. I paced. I stared out the window. The silence was oppressive. Cale checked on me once, his large frame a silent reminder of my captivity, then retreated to his post. I was going stir-crazy. The walls, no matter how expensive, were still walls. It was late afternoon when the elevator chimed. I tensed, expecting Volkov, but it was a woman who stepped out. She was perhaps in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back in a severe silver bun. She was dressed in an impeccably tailored pantsuit and carried a leather briefcase. "Ilara, I presume," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "I am Ms. Petrova. Mr. Volkov has asked me to see to your necessities." She set the briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside was a new, top-of-the-line smartphone, a laptop, and a wallet. The phone and laptop are secure, connected to a private network. They cannot be traced, and their usage is monitored. "Your old phone." She held out her hand. It was not a request. Hesitantly, I retrieved my old phone from my bag and handed it to her. She placed it in the briefcase without a second glance. The wallet contains new identification, credit cards, and a modest amount of cash. "Your old identity is suspended for the time being. It is for your protection." I picked up the new ID card. Ilara Rossi. The name felt foreign. The photo was one I didn't remember taking, my face pale and serious. "He can't just give me a new name." "He can, and he has," Ms. Petrova said, unmoved. "It is a temporary measure. Your financial accounts have been consolidated and transferred to a new secure institution. Your rent has been paid for the next 6 months, though you will not be returning. Your employer has been informed that you resigned due to a family emergency. All loose ends have been tied." I felt dizzy. In the space of a few hours, my entire life had been systematically dismantled and reassembled by a stranger. The efficiency was terrifying. "And my friend, Chloe? She'll be worried." "A message has been sent from your old number explaining that you have taken a last-minute opportunity to work on a private luxury yacht in the Mediterranean. Limited communication for several months. It is a credible cover." She closed the briefcase. "Is there anything else you require?" I just stared at her, speechless. What could I possibly require? My freedom? My life back? She seemed to take my silence as an answer. "Very well. Mr. Volkov will return this evening." And with that, she turned and left, the elevator doors closing on her impassive face. I was now Ilara Rossi. I had new money, new tech, a new past. The old Ilara was on a yacht, a ghost. I sank onto the sofa, the new phone feeling like a lead weight in my hand. This was more than protection. This was assimilation. He wasn't just keeping me safe. He was remaking me in a way that suited his world. And the most frightening part was the small, traitorous part of me that was relieved. The part that was tired of running, tired of worrying, tired of being alone. This cage, for all its bars, was incredibly comfortable. When Volkov returned that evening, the atmosphere shifted. He brought the energy of the outside world in with him, a chill, a tension that hadn't been there before. He dismissed Kale with a nod and poured himself a drink, his movements tight, controlled. "Did Petrova see you?" he asked, his back to me. "Yes. She gave me a new life." I held up the new phone. "Thank you." He turned, hearing the bitterness in my tone. "Sarcasm does not suit you. It is a necessary precaution. Your old apartment was searched an hour ago." The air left my lungs. "What? Professionals?" "They were discreet, but they were looking for something. Or someone. You would not have been safe there." He took a long swallow of his drink. "The threat is not theoretical, Alara. It is active. It is hunting." The room felt suddenly colder. He was right. The new identity, the penthouse prison, it wasn't paranoia. It was a response to a real and present danger. The last of my defiance crumbled, replaced by a cold, sharp fear. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice small. "Now," he said, walking toward me, his gray eyes intent, "we begin your real work. We are going to reconstruct last night. Every second, every face, every word. You are going to take me back to the Vigneto Club, and you are going to show me what you saw." He stopped in front of me. "And you are going to help me find the man who wants me dead." The reconstruction felt like torture. He led me not to the library or the living room, but into a study I hadn't seen before. It was darker, paneled in a rich, dark wood, with a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single ancient tree. There were no windows. It was a room designed for focus, for secrets. He sat behind the desk, steepling his fingers, and looked at me expectantly. "Begin. From the moment you first saw Marco that night." I closed my eyes, trying to push past the fog of fear and focus. It was around 10:30. He came in through the staff entrance, which was unusual. He usually swaggered in through the front. He looked agitated. His hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. He went straight to his office, slammed the door. Did he speak to anyone? I sifted through the memory, the mundane details now taking on a life-or-death significance. He brushed past Sophia, didn't acknowledge her. Then, about 20 minutes before you arrived, he came out. He was on his phone. He was smiling, but it was a nasty smile. He said, "The package is ready for delivery. The wolf will take the bait." Then he laughed and hung up. Volkov's expression didn't change, but the air in the room grew colder. The wolf. He used that name. "It's what people call you," I said quietly. "Go on." After that, he was different. Calmer. Almost serene. He posted himself near the host stand, watching the door. Waiting. When you walked in, his whole body language shifted. He became eager, like a dog hoping for a treat. That's when I knew you were the package. For the next hour, he drilled me. What was Marco wearing? A navy suit, a silver tie. Did he have a watch? A flashy Rolex new. Did he interact with any other staff? He snapped at a busboy for being too slow. Did anyone else approach him? A man in a gray overcoat handed him an envelope. Marco pocketed it without a word. I was surprised by what I remembered. The years of being invisible had sharpened my observational skills to a razor's edge. I could recall the scent of the woman's perfume who sat at the end of the bar, jasmine and patchouli, the pattern on the tie of the man who spilled his drink, tiny martini glasses, the nervous tick of the new barback as he polished glasses. He blinked 3 times in rapid succession. It was a flood of sensory information, and Volkov sifted through it like a prospector panning for gold. "The man in the gray overcoat," he pressed. "Describe him." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to pull the ghost from the haze of memory. Average height, thin. The coat was expensive, but it was too big for him. He had a hat pulled low. I never saw his face, but his hands. He had a ring on his right pinky finger. It was silver, with a black stone. Onyx, maybe. It had a symbol carved into it. A bird of some kind. An eagle? No, a hawk. A stylized hawk. Volkov went perfectly still. "You are certain?" The light caught it when he took his hand out of his pocket. It was just a flash, but I'm sure. He leaned back in his chair, a slow, deliberate movement. The first crack in his controlled facade I had seen. That is unfortunate. Why? Who is he? That ring belongs to a man named Silas Hawke. He is not a player. He is a facilitator, a broker of chaos. He arranges things. If he was delivering payment to Marco, it means the contract did not originate from within my organization. It was outsourced. This is not a simple power grab. This is a professional hit, sanctioned by someone with significant resources. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture far more terrifying than I had imagined. This wasn't just about one man wanting Volkov's throne. This was a coordinated attack from the outside. He's the key, then, I said. This Silas Hawke, he is a ghost, but a ghost you have now seen. His gaze on me was intense, reevaluating. Your eyes are more valuable than I realized. He stood and walked to a panel on the wall, pressing a sequence of buttons. A large screen descended behind his desk. With a few more commands, he pulled up a series of security feeds from the club, different angles from the night before. Show me, he said. Show me where he stood. I stood and approached the screen, my heart pounding. It was surreal, watching the grainy black and white footage of my old life, a life that felt a century away. There I was, a small, anxious figure behind the bar. There was Marco preening by the door. And then, Volkov entered, and the entire energy of the room shifted on the screen, just as it had in reality. There, I said, pointing to a corner of the feed from a camera near the restrooms. The man in the overcoat. He came from that direction. Volkov zoomed in and enhanced the image. It was grainy, but the too big coat was clear. The man kept his head down, his face obscured by the hat. But as he turned to leave, his right hand swung into view. The image was pixelated, but the shape of a ring on his pinky finger was unmistakable. Good, Volkov murmured, a hunter's satisfaction in his voice. Very good. He saved the frame and typed a rapid message on his phone. This gives us a starting point. Hawke operates out of the city. He favors old places, theaters, libraries, museums, places with history and multiple exits. He turned off the screen, and the room was plunged back into the dim light of the desk lamp. He looked at me, and the intensity in his eyes was different now. It wasn't just the cold assessment of an asset. There was a spark of something else. Respect, perhaps. You have a unique talent, Alara, he said. Most people see, but they do not observe. You observe. It is a skill that cannot be taught. It's a skill born from a lifetime of needing to see the threat before it sees you, I replied, the truth slipping out before I could cage it. He was silent for a moment, studying me. We are not so different, you and I. We both live in worlds where a single missed detail can be fatal. The comparison should have offended me, but it didn't. It felt horribly, terrifyingly accurate. We were both survivors, navigating landscapes of hidden teeth. The only difference was the scale. Get some rest, he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. Tomorrow we begin in earnest. The hunt for Silas Hawke begins. I left the study, my mind reeling. The fear was still there, a constant humming undercurrent. But something else was there too. A sense of purpose, a feeling of being useful, of having a skill that mattered in this brutal, high-stakes game. It was a dangerous feeling. It was the feeling of starting to belong. Back in my room, I didn't feel the same oppressive weight of the walls. I picked up the book of sonnets from the library, the one he had left on the desk. I opened it to the marked page. My love is like a fever, longing still. I traced the circled words with my finger. Who did Lorenzo Volkov love with a feverish longing? What, or who, had carved this vulnerability into a man made of stone? The question haunted me more than any threat from Silas Hawke. Because understanding that, I feared, was the real key to surviving him. The next morning began not with a quiet breakfast, but with the arrival of Franco. He entered the penthouse with an air of grim efficiency, a tablet tucked under his arm, and a tension in his shoulders that spoke of a long, fruitless night. Volkov was already waiting, dressed and looking as if he'd never slept, a fresh cup of black coffee steaming on the table beside him. We have a problem, Franco said without preamble, his eyes flicking to me for a fraction of a second before dismissing me as irrelevant. The cleanup on Marco was too clean. The apartment was wiped. No prints, no fibers, no data on his devices. It was professional. I expected nothing less from an operation involving Hawk, Volkov replied, his voice calm. What of the financials? The payments to Marco were routed through a series of shell corporations in the Caymans. Untraceable. But we did find something else. Franco tapped his tablet, bringing up a complex web of transactions. While we were looking into Marco, I ran a standard audit on all recent financial activity with high-level clearance. There's a discrepancy. A series of small recurring payments to a security consulting firm that doesn't exist. The vendor was added to the system 6 months ago. Volkov's gaze sharpened. Who authorized the vendor? The credentials belong to Anthony Ricci. A muscle in Volkov's jaw twitched. Anthony, he said, the name a soft exhale that carried more weight than a shout. He has been with me for 15 years. He handles our most sensitive, legitimate investments. The payments are small, easily overlooked. A few thousand a month, but the pattern is consistent. And the timing coincides with when our security protocols at the docks were compromised, leading to that lost shipment in October. The air in the room thickened. This was no longer an external threat. This was a worm, burrowing deep from within, betrayal from a trusted lieutenant. I stood frozen near the kitchen island, feeling like I was eavesdropping on my own execution. This was the inner workings of his empire, and the machinery was corroded. Volkov's eyes cut to me. Ilara, come here. I approached slowly, feeling Franco's disapproving gaze on me. Volkov took the tablet from him and turned it toward me. Look at these transaction descriptions. The language. Tell me what you see. It was a test, another one. I took the tablet, my fingers brushing against his. The screen showed a list of payments for strategic security analysis, for ongoing risk assessment, for consultancy services rendered. The descriptions were bland, corporate, and designed to be ignored. The grammar is correct, I started, my translator's brain kicking in, analyzing not the numbers, but the words. But the word choice is off. It's repetitive. Consultancy services rendered is a common phrase, but for rendering of provided services. It's stilted. It reads like someone who understands English technically, but isn't a native speaker. They're mimicking language from real invoices without understanding the natural flow. I looked up at Volkov. It's the same inconsistency I saw in the fake vendor names you showed me earlier. It's a pattern. Someone is creating a paper trail to siphon money, and they're not being careful with the linguistics. Franco stared at me, his earlier dismissal replaced by a grudging curiosity. She noticed that in 5 seconds. Our accountants missed it for 6 months. Volkov's gaze on me was unwavering. It is what I told you. She sees what others do not. He took the tablet back. Anthony. He has a cousin. Fresh from Naples. His English is poor. He works in the mailroom, Franco confirmed, his voice tight. He would have the access to see real invoices and mimic them, but not the fluency to get the phrasing right. Bring Anthony in, Volkov said, his tone dropping to something quiet and deadly. But do not alert him. Tell him I need his expertise on the European expansion. I want him here, in this room, in 1 hour. Franco nodded and left, the penthouse door closing with a soft final click. Volkov stood and walked to the window, his back to me. The silence was heavy, weighed down by a friend's betrayal. You knew, I said softly. You suspected it wasn't just Sergio. I suspected many things. Suspicion is the currency of my life. Proof is far more rare. He turned to face me. You provided proof. You connected the linguistic pattern. You have just saved me millions, and possibly my life. Anthony had access to my schedule. He knew I would be at the Vigneto last night. The realization was a cold splash of water. The internal betrayal and the external hit were connected. Anthony was the leak. He had provided the schedule, the access, and the internal knowledge that made the attempt possible. And I had just helped seal his fate. What will you do to him? I asked, my throat dry. That is not your concern. The wall was back up, the brief moment of shared purpose gone. You will be in the study during our conversation. You will listen. You will not make a sound. I want you to hear his voice, to listen to his tales. You will tell me if he lies. It wasn't a request. It was an order. I was being pulled deeper into the darkness, from observer to participant. An hour later, I was seated in a high-backed leather chair in the dark study. The door left ajar. From my position, I could see a sliver of the living room. Volkov sat in an armchair, pretending to review documents. I held my breath, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The elevator chimed. Anthony Ricci walked in, a man in his late 40s with a kind, tired face and a slightly rumpled suit. He looked like an accountant, which he was. He did not look like a traitor. "Lorenzo," he said, his voice warm with what sounded like genuine affection. "You wanted to see me? The Europe files are on my desk. I can have them sent up." "Sit down, Anthony," Volkov said, his voice neutral, even friendly. Anthony sat on the sofa, leaning forward eagerly. "I've been looking over the projections for the Milan holdings. The potential is incredible, but the regulatory landscape is— We will get to that," Volkov interrupted gently. "First, I need your help with a different matter. A discrepancy in the books. Small payments to a security firm. The authorization has your credentials." The change in Anthony was instantaneous. It was subtle, a slight stiffening of the shoulders, a too quick blink, a forced casualness as he leaned back. "My credentials? That's impossible. It must be a system glitch. I'll have IT look into it immediately. The firm doesn't seem to exist, Anthony." Volkov's voice was still calm, a spider feeling the first vibrations in its web. "A shell company, then. You know how these things are set up for tax purposes." Anthony's voice had a new, thin layer of sweat on his upper lip, gleaming in the morning light. "The descriptions on the invoices are poorly worded, stilted. They read like they were written by someone whose first language isn't English." Volkov paused, letting the silence stretch. "It reminded me of your cousin, Marco. How is he settling into the mailroom?" "That was the trap." And Anthony walked right into it. "He's fine. A hard worker, but his English is still not good. He would never be involved in something like this, Lorenzo, I swear." He stopped. He realized his mistake too late. He had confirmed the connection without being accused of it. The air left the room. Volkov's posture shifted from relaxed to predatory in a heartbeat. He didn't raise his voice. "You have been with me for 15 years, Anthony. You held my son at his baptism." Anthony's face crumpled. The genial mask fell away, revealing raw, terrified guilt beneath. "Lorenzo, it was just a little money for my daughter's medical bills. The treatments, they're not covered. I was going to pay it back, I swear on my life." "A little money," Volkov repeated, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more frightening than any scream. "And in return, what did you give them, Anthony? My schedule? Are there security rotations for the dock shipment? What was the price for your daughter's life?" Anthony broke. Sobs racked his body. "It was Sergio. Sergio came to me. He knew about the money I took. He said he'd expose me, ruin me, unless I gave him information. He said it was just for leverage, for internal politics. I didn't know about the truck, Lorenzo. I didn't know he was going to try to kill you. You have to believe me." I sat in the dark study, my hand clamped over my mouth, listening to a man's soul being torn to pieces. This was the cost of this world. This was the reality behind the power in the suits. It was ugly, brutal, and heartbreaking. "Where is Sergio now?" Volkov asked, his voice still terrifyingly calm. "I don't know. After last night, he went dark. He said if anything went wrong, he had a contingency plan. He said the wolf had grown a conscience. He said you were weak." Volkov stood up. He looked down at the weeping man, his expression not of anger, but of a profound, weary disappointment. "You have a daughter, Anthony. Think of her now. Franco will take you to a secure location. You will write down everything you gave Sergio. Every date, every detail. If your information leads us to him, your daughter will keep her father. Is that understood?" It was a mercy I didn't expect. A thread of hope offered in the depths of damnation. Anthony could only nod, his body shaking with relief and shame. Franco entered and quietly escorted the broken man out. The elevator doors closed, and Volkov was left alone in the vast, silent room. He didn't move for a long time. He just stood there, staring at the space where his friend had been. I crept out of the study. He heard me but didn't turn. "You showed him mercy," I said quietly. "Mercy is a luxury I cannot often afford," he replied, his back still to me. "But children should not be orphans because of their father's sins. It is a lesson I learned too well." In that moment, he wasn't the wolf. He was just a man, standing in the ruins of his own trust, burdened by the weight of the choices he had to make. And I, against all reason and every instinct of self-preservation, felt a terrible, undeniable pull toward him. The silence after Anthony's departure was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Volkov remained at the window, a statue carved from grief and fury. I didn't dare speak. I had just witnessed the brutal mechanics of his world, the discovery of a traitor, the application of pressure, the dispensing of a punishment that was both harsh and, in its own way, merciful. My knees felt weak. The coffee I'd drunk earlier churned in my stomach, acid and betrayal. Finally, he moved. He didn't turn, but his voice, low and rough, cut through the quiet. You heard, it wasn't a question. Yes, and? I swallowed, my throat tight. And I think Sergio was right about one thing. That made him turn. His gray eyes were storm clouds promising a tempest. Explain. You do have a conscience. It's why Anthony is still breathing. A truly weak man would have killed him in a fit of rage. A truly ruthless man would have killed him as a message. You found a third path. That's not a weakness. That's a different kind of strength, a harder one. He studied me, his head tilted, as if I were a complex document in a language he was only beginning to decipher. You see things in shades of gray, he observed. That is a dangerous way to see my world. It is mostly black and white. Life and death. Loyalty and betrayal. Is it? I challenged, a spark of my old defiance igniting. Then why am I still here? I'm a shade of gray, an outsider who saw too much. The black and white choice would have been to pay me off and send me away, or to silence me permanently. You did neither. You brought me into your home. You're using my skills. That sounds like a shade of gray to me. A long, tense moment passed. Then something remarkable happened. A genuine, weary smile touched his lips. It was brief, but it transformed his face, carving lines of humor and humanity around his eyes and mouth. It was devastating. You are, without a doubt, the most infuriating woman I have ever met. The tension in the room shifted, twisting into something new, something electric and uncharted. The space between us seemed to shrink. I could feel the heat from his body, smell the faint, clean scent of his soap mixed with the lingering aroma of coffee. My heart was no longer pounding from fear, but from something else entirely. A reckless, terrifying curiosity. We need to find Sergio, I said, my voice barely a whisper, an attempt to claw back to safer ground. We will, he replied, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a heartbeat before meeting my eyes again. But first we eat, and you will stop arguing with me. He ordered food from a restaurant that didn't have a menu, the kind that asks how many people and then sends a masterpiece. We ate at the dining table, the spread of food between us like a temporary peace treaty. The conversation was stilted at first as we navigated the minefield of what had just happened. But slowly it found its way to neutral territory. He asked me about languages, about the nuances of translation. I found myself explaining the subtle differences between Italian and Sicilian dialects, and how a misplaced word could change the entire tone of a contract. He listened, truly listened, his intelligence sharp and focused. He asked insightful questions, challenging my interpretations, engaging in an intellectually stimulating way. It was the most normal, and yet the most abnormal conversation I'd ever had. Here I was, discussing linguistics with a Mafia boss over a meal that cost more than my monthly rent, while his men stood guard outside and a traitorous cousin plotted his death. You love it, don't you? He asked suddenly. The puzzle of it, finding the hidden meaning in the words. It's the only thing that's ever made sense to me, I admitted. Words have rules. Structure. You can deconstruct them, understand their architecture. People are messy, unpredictable, like me, especially like you. He leaned back, swirling the red wine in his glass. My father believed fear was the only language that truly translated across all cultures. I have spent my life trying to learn a different vocabulary. What vocabulary is that? Respect, alliances, legacy. He looked at me, and the intensity was back, but it was softer now. A legacy worth leaving. The air between us grew thick again, charged with unspoken things. The memory of his thumb on my wrist, the way he'd looked at me after I'd stood up to him, the terrifying pull I felt toward this impossible man. It all coalesced into a single, breathless moment. After dinner, I retreated to the library, needing space to think. I picked up the book of sonnets again, the worn pages a tangible link to the hidden man inside the fortress. I was still standing there when he found me. He stood in the doorway watching me. "You are drawn to that book." I closed it, holding it to my chest like a shield. "It's a contradiction. I'm trying to understand it. Some contradictions are not meant to be understood, only accepted." He walked into the room, stopping a few feet away. The dim light from the single lamp cast his face in shadow and sharp relief. "My mother was a poet. A terrible one, but she loved the words. She believed they could save people. This was hers." He gestured to the book in my hands. "She sounds like a romantic." "She was a fool," he said, but there was no malice in his words, only a deep, abiding sadness. "She loved my father. She believed her love could gentle him. It could not. This world devours romantics." His eyes met mine, and the warning in them was as clear as a shout. "It is why I have always avoided them. Until now?" The question slipped out, brave and stupid. He didn't answer with words. He closed the distance between us in 2 slow strides. He didn't touch me, but I could feel his heat, could see the storm in his eyes up close. My breath hitched. Every cell in my body was screaming, a chaotic chorus of run and stay. "You are not a romantic, Alara," he murmured, his voice a low vibration in the quiet room. "You are a realist, a survivor. That is the only reason you are still standing here. That is the only reason I am allowing this. This madness. What madness?" I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs, against the book I held between us. His hand came up, so slowly, and he brushed a stray strand of hair from my cheek. His fingertips were surprisingly gentle, a whisper of contact that sent a jolt straight through my core. "This," he said, and then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle or questioning. It was a claim, a release of all the pent-up tension, the curiosity, the dangerous attraction that had been simmering between us since the moment he'd grabbed my wrist in the club. His mouth was firm and demanding, and I met his demand with my own, a surge of reckless abandon. The book of sonnets fell from my nerveless fingers, landing on the rug with a soft thud. My hands came up, not to push him away, but to clutch at the lapels of his shirt, anchoring myself in the storm. It was a kiss that tasted of expensive wine, of power, of warning, and of a desperate, lonely hunger that mirrored my own. It was the worst decision I had ever made. And in that moment, it felt like the only one that made any sense at all. When he finally broke away, we were both breathing heavily. His forehead rested against mine. His eyes closed. "This is a terrible idea," I breathed, echoing his own words back to him. "The worst," he agreed, his voice rough. But his arms tightened around me, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us, and I knew with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty that the line had been crossed. There was no going back. The world had narrowed to the space between our bodies, to the frantic beat of my heart echoing in my ears, and the solid, real warmth of him. His mouth found mine again, this kiss slower, deeper, a deliberate exploration that shattered the last of my resistance. The careful walls I had built around myself, the rules for survival, crumbled into dust. My fingers tangled in the soft hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. A low groan rumbled in his chest, a raw, unfiltered sound that was nothing like the controlled tones he used for business. This was the man stripped bare. And I was answering him with an honesty that terrified me. He walked me backward until my legs hit the edge of the large reading desk. Books and papers scattered as he lifted me onto it, his hands sliding from my waist down to my hips, pulling me to the very edge until I was flush against him. The hard line of his body was an undeniable reality, a promise and a threat all in one. "Alara," he breathed against my lips, my name a prayer and a curse. His hands came up to frame my face, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones with a reverence that belied the violence I knew he was capable of. "Tell me to stop." It was a command and a plea, the last exit offered before the point of no return. I looked into his winter-gray eyes, saw the storm there, the war between his nature and this new dangerous desire. I saw my own reflection, wild-eyed and willing. I could have lied. I could have summoned the ghost of my father's warnings. I could have chosen survival. Instead, I told the truth. Don't you dare. A feral, triumphant light flashed in his eyes. He kissed me again, a conquering kiss, and his hands left my face to work at the buttons of my shirt. My own fingers were clumsy on the buckle of his belt, on the buttons of his own crisp white shirt. Fabric rustled and fell to the floor, a puddle of our defenses. When his skin met mine, it was an electric shock. He was all hard planes and coiled strength, a landscape of old scars and warm living flesh. His mouth traveled from my lips to my jaw, down the column of my throat, and I arched against him, a soft cry escaping me. The world outside, Sergio, the threats, the dead men, and the betrayals ceased to exist. There was only this: the scent of him, cedar and man, the feel of his calloused hands mapping my body, the taste of him on my tongue. He was meticulous, demanding, leaving no part of me unexplored, unworshipped. It was an assault on my senses, a claiming that felt less like an invasion and more like a homecoming to a place I never knew existed. When he finally entered me, it was with a slow, deliberate pressure that made me gasp, my nails digging into the hard muscles of his back. He stilled, his forehead damp against mine, his body trembling with the effort of his control. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice ragged. I opened my eyes, drowning in the stormy gray of his. "I see you," he whispered, and then he began to move. It was not gentle. It was raw and real and devastating. It was a conversation without words, a battle, and a surrender. The polished wood of the desk was hard beneath me. The scent of old books and our mingled breath filled the air. He drove me to the edge of reason, his name a broken chant on my lips, and when I fell, shattering around him with a sob that was half terror, half ecstasy, he followed me. His own release a guttural cry muffled against my shoulder, his body collapsing against mine for a single, weightless moment before he caught himself. For a long time, there was only the sound of our ragged breathing. He didn't pull away. He held me there, on the desk, his body still intimately joined with mine, his face buried in my hair. I could feel the frantic hammering of his heart slowly begin to steady against my own. The reality of what we had just done began to seep back in, cold and sobering. I had just slept with Lorenzo Volkov. I had let the wolf into my bed, into my body. I had broken the single most important rule of survival. He was the first to move. He straightened, his gaze sweeping over me. My flushed skin, my tousled hair, the evidence of our passion. His expression was unreadable, a mask of control sliding back into place, but his eyes still burned with a residual heat. He picked up his trousers from the floor and stepped into them, his back to me. The moment of vulnerability was over. The king was back on his throne. I slid off the desk, my legs unsteady, and gathered my own clothes, my hands shaking. I felt exposed, raw, and profoundly foolish. What had I been thinking? This changed everything. It made me vulnerable. It made me a target in a new, more intimate way. "This was a mistake," I said, the words tasting like ashes. He turned, his shirt still unbuttoned, revealing the powerful scarred chest I had just traced with my fingers. "It was inevitable. It complicates everything." "It simplifies one thing," he countered, his voice low. "Your place is here, with me." "As what?" I asked, a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. "Your prisoner? Your consultant? Your mistress?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand cupping my chin, forcing my eyes to meet his. "You are mine. That is all you need to know for now." The possessiveness in his tone should have infuriated me. It should have sent me running for the hills. Instead, a treacherous part of me, the part that had been alone and fighting for so long, preened at the certainty in his voice. To belong to someone, even someone like him, was a seductive poison. "I need to shower," I said, pulling away from his touch. He let me go, his gaze following me as I walked, naked and vulnerable, out of the library and down the hall to the guest room. I locked the door behind me, a futile gesture, and stood under the scalding spray of the shower, trying to wash the scent of him from my skin, the memory of his touch from my mind. It was no use. He was under my skin now. I had crossed the line, and the fire I had played with had already begun to consume me. Later, wrapped in a robe, I heard a soft knock on the door. It wasn't him. It was Cale. "The boss asked me to give you this," he said, his face impassive as he handed me a small velvet box. I took it with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled on a bed of black silk, was a bracelet. It was elegant, deceptively simple, a platinum chain with a single teardrop-shaped black diamond. It was beautiful, cold, and unmistakably a collar, a mark of ownership. There was no note. None was needed. I closed the box and set it on the nightstand. I didn't put it on, but I didn't throw it away either. I just stared at it, a symbol of the gilded cage I had just willingly stepped into. The hunt for Sergio was still on. The threat was still very real. But the battlefield had irrevocably shifted. It was no longer just outside these walls. It was right here, in this room, in the frantic beating of my own traitorous heart. The bracelet sat on the nightstand like an unspoken verdict. I didn't touch it. To put it on felt like surrender. To throw it away felt like a provocation. So I let it sit there, a cold, glittering question mark at the periphery of my new reality. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the ghost of his hands on my skin, heard the ragged sound of my name in his voice. I had tamed nothing. I had only thrown myself into the wolf's den, and now I was waiting to see if I would be devoured or kept. The morning came, gray and muted through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I dressed in the clothes provided for me, another uniform of soft, expensive fabrics that felt like someone else's skin, and ventured out. The penthouse was silent. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he was gone, that the night had been a dream, and I was alone again. Then I saw him. He was on the terrace, a cell phone pressed to his ear, his back to me. He was dressed in another impeccable suit, the armor fully back in place. The man from the library was gone, locked away behind a wall of crisp, white cotton and tailored wool. I stood in the doorway, unsure of my welcome, of my role. He finished his call and turned, his gaze sweeping over me. There was no warmth in his eyes, no acknowledgement of what had passed between us. There was only the cool, assessing look of a general surveying his troops. "We have a lead on Silas Hawke," he said, his voice all business. He was spotted last night at the Orpheum Theater. A private viewing of a restored silent film. It fits his profile. He walked past me into the living room, picking up a tablet from the coffee table. He uses the chaos of a public place as cover. The crowd, the noise, the multiple exits. "So what's the plan?" I asked, my voice sounding small. "We visit him. Tonight. The final performance." He handed me the tablet. It displayed the theater's layout, blueprints, and security camera locations. "I want you to look at this. You have a fresh perspective. Tell me what you see." It was a peace offering, or perhaps a distraction. A way to re-establish the professional dynamic that I had so thoroughly obliterated. I took the tablet, my fingers brushing against his. There was no spark this time, only a dull ache. I focused on the screen, falling into the familiar comfort of analysis. The Orpheum was a labyrinth, multiple levels, winding corridors, and service passages that weren't on the original plans. "He'll have lookouts," I said, zooming in on the balconies. "Here and here. They'll have a clear view of the main entrance and the lobby. If they see you or your men, he'll be gone before you reach the foyer." "Agreed," You can't go in through the front. You need to be a ghost. I traced a route on the screen with my finger. There's a service entrance on the west side, used for deliveries. It leads directly to the backstage area. From there, you can access the private boxes through a maintenance corridor. It's not monitored. He looked at me, a flicker of that earlier respect returning to his eyes. How do you know that? I translated the renovation contracts for the Historical Society 2 years ago. I remember the addendum about preserving the original service routes for structural integrity. It was a fight with the city planners. A small, sad smile touched my lips. It's funny. That boring, tedious job might help you catch your ghost. Nothing about you is boring, Alara, he said, his voice low. The use of my name, the first time he'd said it since the library, felt like a caress. He took the tablet back, his fingers typing rapidly. We'll use your route. A small team, Franco, I, and 2 others. We go in quietly. And me? I asked, already knowing the answer, dreading it. You will be in the command vehicle, 2 blocks away. You will have a live feed from our body cameras. You will be our eyes. If you see something we miss, you say it. He finally looked at me. Really looked at me. I trust your eyes. 3 words. They shouldn't have meant anything. They should have been a manipulation, a tool to ensure my cooperation. But they landed in the hollow, aching part of me that had always been alone. And they took root. He trusted my eyes. No one had ever trusted me with anything more important than correctly translating a clause about liability. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of quiet preparation. Men came and went, speaking in low tones. Weapons were checked, communications tested. I was given a headset and shown the bank of monitors that would be set up in the armored van. I was to be the silent watcher in the sky. As dusk began to settle over the city, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange, he found me once more in the library. I was standing by the window, watching the city's lights begin to glitter like fallen stars. You should not have come here last night, he said from the doorway. I didn't turn. You shouldn't have kissed me. I am not a good man, Alara. I have done things that would haunt your dreams. I know. This world, it will destroy anything soft. Anything good? I finally turned to face him. You keep telling me how dangerous you are, Lorenzo, as if I haven't figured it out for myself. But you brought me into this. You made me a part of it. You don't get to warn me away now. He walked toward me, stopping an arm's length away. The dying light caught the silver in his hair, the sharp planes of his face. I am not warning you away. I am telling you that if you stay, there is no going back. The innocence you have left will be gone. I lost my innocence a long time ago, I whispered, in a different life. He reached out then, not to pull me to him, but to pick up the velvet box from the nightstand where I'd left it. He opened it, the black diamond winking in the twilight. He didn't ask. He took the bracelet and fastened it around my wrist. The metal was cool against my skin, the weight of it strange and final. He didn't let go of my hand. His thumb stroked over the jewel, then over the pulse point beneath it. Then we understand each other, he said. It was not a question. Downstairs, the team was assembling. It was time to go hunting. The command vehicle was a rolling fortress disguised as a telecommunications van. The interior was a stark contrast to the penthouse, all brushed steel, blinking lights, and the low hum of powerful electronics. I sat in a swivel chair before a bank of 4 monitors, a headset snug over my ears. Franco was beside me, his presence a solid, silent anchor, his own gaze fixed on the screens as he coordinated the perimeter team. My mouth was dry. The weight of the bracelet on my wrist felt like a shackle, a constant reminder of the stakes. This wasn't a translation. A mistake here wouldn't mean a lost client or a grammatical error. It would mean blood on the ornate carpets of the Orpheum Theater. On the center screen, a grainy, jostling feed from Lorenzo's body camera showed the inside of a service elevator. He was flanked by 2 of his men, their faces set in grim masks. They were all in black tactical gear, a terrifying transformation from the suits of power to the uniforms of war. Approaching level 3, Lorenzo's voice crackled in my ear, calm and focused. No contact. I watched the screen, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The elevator doors slid open to a narrow, dimly lit corridor lined with dusty props and old stage flats. The air, even through a camera lens, looked thick with dust. According to the blueprint, this corridor led to the back of the private boxes on the grand tier. Silas Hawke was in box 7. "Turning right," Lorenzo murmured. His camera view swept the corridor. A rope, a forgotten sandbag, the glittering eye of a dragon prop staring blankly into the darkness. Everything was still. Too still. My own eyes, the ones he claimed to trust, scanned the other screens. Feeds from the other 2 men, and a static shot of the theater's main entrance from a drone high above. The performance had begun. The distant swelling score of the orchestra filtered faintly through the van's walls. "Hold," I said into my mic, the word coming out as a croak. I cleared my throat. "Lorenzo, hold." He froze instantly. His camera stabilized and focused on the corridor ahead. "What do you see?" Franco turned his head slightly, his eyes on me. I was leaning forward, squinting at the screen of his man on the left. "The dust," I whispered. "Look at the dust on the floor in the left-hand feed." Lorenzo's view didn't move, but I knew he was checking the other feed on his own wrist-mounted display. The dust in the corridor was disturbed as expected, but the pattern, it wasn't just their footprints. Ahead of them, about 20 feet, the dust was scuffed in a wide circular pattern, as if someone had stood there, shifting their weight, waiting. "A lookout," Lorenzo's voice was a low growl. They knew we'd come this way. "He's gone now," I said, my brain clicking into that analytical space, the fear receding under the pressure of the puzzle. "But he was there recently. He's reported your position. Hawke will be moving." "We accelerate," Lorenzo decided. "Alpha, Beta, flank the box from the side entrances." "On my mark." The feed split as the 2 other men broke away, moving with silent, lethal grace. Lorenzo continued down the main corridor, his pace quickening. The music from the theater grew louder, a dramatic, silent film score that underscored the tension with absurd irony. He reached a small unmarked door, Box 7's private entrance. He didn't hesitate. He turned the handle and pushed. The camera view swept into the plush red velvet interior of the private box. It was empty. A single half-finished glass of champagne sat on the ledge. A program lay discarded on a chair. "He's gone," one of the other men reported over the comms. "Side entrance is clear." "He can't have just vanished," Lorenzo snapped, his control fraying for the first time. I was scanning all the feeds, my mind racing. He'd known they were coming. He'd had a lookout. He'd left in a hurry, but how? The boxes only had 2 exits, to the corridor and to the theater itself. He wouldn't have gone into the crowd. My eyes caught a flicker of movement on the static drone feed of the main entrance. A figure, tall and thin, wearing a long coat despite the mild evening, was exiting the theater. He moved with a strange, unhurried pace. He turned left, away from the main flow of the dispersing crowd. And on his right hand, even in the grainy resolution, a glint of silver on his pinky finger. "Lorenzo," I said, my voice urgent. "Main entrance. He's outside. He's heading east on Addison. Gray overcoat. He has the ring." A beat of silence. Then, "All units converge on the main entrance. East on Addison. The Fox is in the open." The feeds became a chaotic jumble as the teams moved, Lorenzo's camera showing a blur of red velvet and gold trim as he sprinted from the box. The calm, methodical operation had dissolved into a street chase. I watched, helpless, from my chair in the van, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of the console. We had him. We had to have him. The drone feed tracked the figure as he turned down an alley. Lorenzo and his team were seconds behind. They entered the alley. It was a dead end. The figure in the overcoat stood at the far wall, his back to them. He slowly raised his hands. "Silas Hawke," Lorenzo's voice came, cold and clear through the comms. "Turn around, slowly." The man turned. It wasn't Hawke. It was a teenager, his face pale and terrified. The overcoat was several sizes too big. The ring on his finger was a cheap plastic trinket. "He paid me," the kid stammered, his voice cracking. $100. Said to wear the coat and walk this way. I don't know anything, I swear." A decoy. A brilliantly simple, arrogant decoy. Hawke had played us. He'd led us on a chase while he slipped away on another route. The frustration that radiated from Lorenzo's frozen camera feed was a physical force. He had been outmaneuvered. "Bring him in," Lorenzo said, his voice dangerously quiet. He might have seen something. The operation was over. We had failed. The van was silent on the drive back to the penthouse. The euphoria of the hunt had curdled into the ashes of defeat. Franco didn't speak. I took off the headset, the plastic suddenly feeling heavy and useless. Lorenzo was already in the penthouse when we arrived. He had shed the tactical gear and was back in his dark slacks and a shirt, the sleeves rolled up. He stood at the window, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He didn't turn as we entered. He was toying with us, Franco said, his voice gravelly with fatigue and anger. He knew the route. He knew the timing. He has a source, Lorenzo. A very good one. I am aware, Lorenzo replied, his voice flat. He finally turned. His eyes were chips of glacial ice. They found me. You saw the dust. You identified the decoy. Your observations were correct. It wasn't praise. It was a cold, hard fact. It wasn't enough. No, he agreed. It was not. He walked toward me, stopping close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. He is laughing at me. He thinks this is a game. He thinks I have grown slowly. Soft. His gaze dropped to the bracelet on my wrist. He will learn otherwise. The threat wasn't directed at me, but I felt it coil in the air around us. The failure had stripped away the brief vulnerability I'd seen. The wolf was back, and he was hungry for blood. The hunt for Silas Hawke was no longer just business. It was personal. The failure was a poison in the penthouse's air, thick and suffocating. Lorenzo's quiet fury was a storm contained by sheer force, of will, radiating from him in waves that made the very light seem to dim. He dismissed Franco with a curt nod, and we were alone again, in the vast, silent space. The city glittered below, a tapestry of ordinary lives untouched by the humiliation that festered in this room, high above it all. He drained his glass and set it down on the marble counter with a sharp, definitive click. The sound was a full stop to the night's ambitions. He didn't look at me, but I felt his anger shift, turning inward. He was in my city, in my theater. He walked in, set his trap, and walked out. And I was left chasing a child in an oversized coat. His voice was low, a controlled vibration of rage. This is not a setback. It is an insult. I stood my ground, the bracelet cool against my skin. He knew you'd come. He knew the route. Franco's right. He has a source with high-level access, maybe higher than Anthony. He turned then, his gray eyes burning. There is no one higher than Anthony was, except for Franco and myself. The implication hung in the air, ugly and unspoken. Could he truly trust Franco, the man who had been his shadow, his right hand? In this world, it seemed, no one was above suspicion, not even the king himself. What did the boy say? I asked, needing to steer us back to facts, away from the corrosive doubt. Nothing of value. A man approached him outside the theater, paid him cash, gave him the code and the ring, told him where to walk. He never saw his face. Lorenzo ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. It was a message. He is not just hiding. He is performing, showing me that my domain is his stage. He walked toward his study and I followed, drawn into the vortex of his plotting. He activated the large wall screen, pulling up city maps, traffic camera feeds, and the theater's blueprints once more. We look for the anomaly, he said, more to himself than to me. The one thing that does not fit. The theater was his chosen venue. Why? It is not just the exits, it is the crowd, the performance. He needed the cover. He zoomed in on the guest list for the private boxes, procured by means I didn't question. He was not there to watch me. He was there to meet someone. My eyes scanned the list of names, a roster of the city's elite, philanthropists, corporate heirs, a visiting opera star. Nothing stood out. Then I saw it. A name tucked away in box 5, not 7. A name that should not have been there. Lorenzo, I said, my voice tight. Look, box 5. He followed my gaze. The name on the screen was Alexander Rostenkowski, a city alderman, a man known for his anti-corruption crusades and his very public, very vehement denunciations of organized crime. A man who had called for Volkov's head on a political platter more than once. Rostenkowski, Lorenzo breathed, the name a revelation. He was meeting Rostenkowski. The pieces snapped together with brutal, chilling clarity. This wasn't just an external power play or an internal coup. This was an alliance. Silas Hawke, the broker of chaos, was brokering a deal between Sergio and a politician. Sergio would get the throne, and in return, Rostenkowski would get a cleaned-up city, with Volkov's organization either dismantled or handed to him on a silver platter. The political legitimacy would protect Sergio from external rivals. It was a masterstroke. He's not just trying to kill you, I whispered, the scope of the ambition stealing my breath. He's trying to replace you, permanently, with a politician in his pocket. Lorenzo's face was a mask of cold, calculating fury. The personal insult was now a strategic catastrophe. The gala, he said. In 2 days, the museum fundraiser. Rostenkowski is the guest of honor. Hawke will be there. He will need to finalize the terms. He looked at me, and the storm in his eyes had crystallized into a deadly purpose. That is where we will be too. We can't just walk in. It's a high-security event. You. I am a patron of the arts, he corrected, a thin, dangerous smile on his lips. And you, my dear Alara, will be my translator. I have a sudden, pressing need to discuss Renaissance. Art with a Japanese investor who speaks no English. Your cover is perfect. The plan was audacious. To walk into the lion's den, to stand in the same room with the man who wanted him dead and the politician who was sanctioning it. It was either brilliance or madness. And what do we do when we're there? We observe, we listen. We find the thread. And when we do, his smile vanished, replaced by an expression of absolute finality. We pull, and we watch their entire world unravel. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cradle my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. The touch was no longer about passion, but about possession, about alliance. You are the only one he will not expect. The one variable his source could not have reported. The ghost who sees the dust on the floor. He leaned in, his lips brushing my forehead in a kiss that was a seal, a vow. You will be my eyes and ears, and together we will end this. The weight of the task settled on my shoulders, heavy and terrifying. I was no longer just a bystander, a victim of circumstance. I was an active participant in a war. I looked at the man before me, this complex, dangerous, magnetic force of nature, and I knew there was no retreat. I had chosen my side in the shades of gray. I met his gaze, my own resolve hardening. Then we should get ready, I said. We have a gala to attend.